I don't think that there's a single game enthusiast or fan out there who isn't familiar with the saga of No Man's Sky. The game was initially released in August of 2016, nearly 2 full years ago, and was ripped up and down by players in the industry at large for its complete, incomprehensibly public failure to live up to its promises. The game was initially teased several years before its release, with random screenshots or trailers that showed off its artistic leanings and the capabilities of its engine, with little to no further explanation of what developer Hello Games was creating. Intrigue and mystery surrounded the title like a thick fog, and speculation ran rampant for extended periods of time. A relatively small following kept hype simmering throughout its development cycle until immediately boiling over into a hype train so fast and so colossal that no game ever could have fulfilled the expectations laid at its feet. Ever looking for the next big console shipper, PlayStation shoveled a lot of fuel into the hype train furnace, exacerbated further by unreasonable promises from Sean Murray, Hello Games director. The game that shipped on launch day was a far sight from what customers had in mind. All of those misleading gameplay trailers and promises as empty as the game's expansive universe crashed that train right into a wall of negative PR and angry players. The game shipped millions of units on a dream that was never fulfilled, and for months all the industry produced was criticism and outrage over what was sold to those who bought the game, some even going so far as to accuse the small development studio of intentionally scamming their customers. Over the past 2 years, Hello Games has quietly been releasing major content patches for the game in an ongoing show of repairing the damage to their image. Whispers have finally shifted into hope, and further speculation has fans and onlookers curious as to whether the game, after last week's release of the title's biggest free update yet, is finally the game they had been promised years ago. With that being said, I'm very happy to bring you my late to the party review for No Man's Sky next. No Man's Sky Next is the optimistically hopeful title they have given this last patch, which aims to overhaul massive sections of the game and add in full multiplayer support, thereby fulfilling the promises of yesteryear that players have been demanding since the initial launch. No Man's Sky has always been a game about crafting and exploration. Its primary hook is the monumental scale of the game's procedurally generated universe, and trust me when I say, as far as hooks go, it's the hookiest of them all. When I tell you the game has over 18 quintillion unique planets in its universe, it's easy to sell that short by shoving it in the "yeah, that's a big fucking number, heard that one before" box. But trust me, this is truly a technical feat that they've cobbled together here. One of the best examples I've seen for this idea is that if you visited each planet, removing the travel time involved, and stood on them for 1 second each, it would still take you 585 billion with a B years to see everything. The first time you gain the ability to jump from system to system through hyperspace, you'll see what I'm talking about. This game is massive. The universe is shared between all players who start a save file, but multiplayer has a complicated rule set, so we'll go over that in a little bit. When you start your game, you'll be dumped on a random planet somewhere in the outer rim of the universe, in much the same fashion that all other survival games have done before. You won't be here long though, because after the first 30 minutes have done a laughably horrendous job of teaching you the game's mechanics, you'll have repaired your crashed ship and will be able to make greater strides towards intergalactic freedom and the typical gameplay loops that you'll be participating in for most of the game. Alright, so I'm going to break from convention here a little bit compared to some of my other videos, because I don't know exactly how I feel about this game after having spent close to 30 hours with it over the last several days. So instead of talking about the game's elements separately, I'm going to loosely talk about what I dislike about this game, and then about what I love about this game. This title is polarizing in ways I haven't ever seen before, not in the typical fashion of people will either love or hate it, but more so in the way that everyone will love it and everyone will hate it. This review is going to take a dark, negative turn for a bit, guys, but please stick with me till the second half because I promise there is some really dope stuff here. Never before have I played a game that can change my opinion from minute to minute like No Man's Sky can, and that puts me in a weird place to review it, but here we go, fellas. The game got an endless amount of flack at release for not having any sense of purpose. After having poured resources into fixing this, I can confidently say that it's still a fucking problem. The story is incredibly loose with broad objectives that barely scratch the minimum requirements to be called a story at all. The devs and a small sect of fanatic fans have and will continue to scream that this isn't a conventional game, game, and as such requires a different structure for progression, and I suppose I understand to a certain degree. The game leaning so heavily on a central theme of exploration and covering lots of ground means that it needs a decentralized device for telling its story, and it finds it through its engine. The story adapts its details to the system that you're in. Players won't ever be following the same path from galaxy to galaxy as anyone else, so while I may have to meet such and such NPC on this planet, you may need to venture to an entirely different section of the universe to do the same. This is neat because practically every single time you come across a planet or installation you haven't been to, you will have been the first player to ever discover it. However, this decoupling of story from its details has a very much net negative effect on players' primary drive for progress. Without being able to handcraft elements that could have defined particular characters or locales, the player has neither incentive nor an option to care about anything happening. It quickly becomes a generic go here, pick up this, craft this loop that anyone who has ever played a really bad MMO will be familiar with. It's a real missed opportunity to create something truly memorable and dynamic out of the technical marvels that they've already achieved. The story has always ridden second, third, or fourth to other in-game elements or mechanics, and I wish they would have put resources into redoing the entire central story instead of giving us the 25,000th different type of wall we can put on our base. This theme of generalization flows nicely into the next area of disappointment: variety. For a game that has such an endless surplus of diversity, goddamn does it feel so samey all the time. It won't be long into the game before you are able to see that all of the game's different vistas, flora, and fauna are only skin deep and behave nearly identically. All planets either have an atmosphere or they don't. If they do, they either have a relatively safe atmosphere or they don't. If they don't, they either have acid rain, firestorms, or blizzards that sound far more exciting than they are. Ultimately, these atmospheric events all do the same thing. They drain your hazmat shielding so that you either need to bolster it with some sodium or find shelter before the shielding runs out. Depending on which planet you're on, this may take 3 minutes or 10 minutes, but there isn't any further diversity to the mechanic. The same holds true for wildlife from system to system. There are a dizzying number of different animals you'll see during your travels, but they all behave largely in the same way, which is remarkably boring. Most of them will simply walk around in circles or in herds and simply look pretty so that you can scan them. Once, a single time, an animal attacked me when I walked a bit too close, but it wasn't anything 3 seconds from my mining laser wasn't able to clean up nicely. The same goes for the plants. There are plants of all shapes and sizes. A certain fraction of them are capable of damaging you in certain ways, but that's about it. Most of your time will be spent harvesting and crafting, and this can be hit or miss. For all the different rocks and flora you'll come across, they will nearly all break down into the same core group of elements used for crafting. Typically when mining, you'll receive ferrite, carbon, dihydrogen, or sodium, and all of your basic survival materials can easily be made from these. The crafting chain can get more complex and confusing with further sophistication built into your crafting goals, but it often can and will lead to frustration. This is further burdened by the horrible console-first choices they made regarding their UI design, and the fact that they've made several system revisions to their interface and it's still this bad makes me terrified of what it must have been like at launch. There are menus and submenus and sub-submenus, often many layers deep, and you're going to constantly be diving into them for the most basic of actions. They've clearly tried to work in shortcuts around this hassle by adding a separate quick menu that you can use to rapidly recharge the tool you're using or recall your vehicle. I suppose there are points to be earned there, but to me it's almost an admission. Knowing they have a UI problem, and instead of properly fixing it, they just slap on a band-aid. You'll come to learn very, very quickly that the most desirable commodity in all of the universe is extra inventory space, and it sure is hard to come by. You'll quickly have loaded down your suit inventory into Starship, and will need to delete stacks of items to make room for less interesting materials that you simply must have. In a decision I don't think I will ever come to understand, crafting upgrades to various parts of your suit, ships, or multi-tool take up an inventory space for each upgrade and permanently locks it unless you decide to get rid of the upgrade. This kind of system would generally force interesting gameplay decisions with an emphasis on risk versus reward, but in a game with such confusing and frustrating storage solutions where its loop encourages you to collect and hold on to things, it's just flat out perplexing. Speaking of unnecessarily frustrating decisions, we lastly find ourselves skimming the subject aspect of multiplayer. The way this works is that the universe is shared between everyone playing the game, and a cap of 12 players per instance is set in place. Outside of group play, players will only be in the same instance should they ever be in the same solar system. Amazingly, this happened one time purely by coincidence. Another guy warped into my system and we were automatically able to speak to each other through the game's inbuilt VoIP communications. That's not going to be the norm though, and typically you're going to want to invite friends directly into your instance, up to 4 players in a group, where you'll enjoy synchronous multiplayer. Playing this game with friends is a lot of fun, as we'll cover shortly, so I don't have any earthly idea why they decided to mess this up with ridiculously unnecessary restrictions. One of the big features of the game is its base building, which can be pretty damned impressive. You can make some amazing stuff here, and building with friends may seem very appealing. Instead of having a shared base that you can all build on at your leisure, whoever lays the first base element down assumes ownership of the entire thing. Your party can all build on it and have a jolly good time until the second the owner has to sign off, at which point, although the base will still be there to see, group members won't be able to build onto or interact with it in any way until the owner is back online. This really sucks. If you had goals of being able to build something incredible while your friend was offline, you better stick to your own base, which, by the way, can't be within several square kilometers of his. Pay attention, because it gets worse. While you're logged into your buddy's game, you guys are going to share atmospheric conditions. But the second you are synced back to your instance, you are subject to whatever the procedural algorithm decided to give you. For example, when my friend and I built a base in his instance, we enjoyed sunny skies and a passive ecosystem. He had to sign off, so I decided I'd just fly down the coastline and build my own base a little bit further down from his, just to find out that now the planet featured torrential toxic storms that lasted 5 minutes and occurred every 3. Not ideal for a home base, to say the least. I'm praying that these issues are simple oversights concerning the netcode and will be patched out sometime in the near future, because if this is working as intended, these people have lost their minds and have no hope at retaining a sizable active user base. These seem like basic requirements to maintain a cohesive multiplayer option, and I'm praying that they can get this right. I know that I haven't painted the prettiest picture of the game for you. It's been a little dark, and that's simply because of how incredibly frustrated I am that these relatively simple systems-based problems overshadow what is truly a remarkable experience. For every element that I despise here is another that, and this really isn't hyperbole, inspires a very real sense of being awestruck by what's in front of me. For all of my whining about the lack of depth to each of the planets and their various inhabitants, it really is a crazy beautiful backdrop to the game's different activities. The first time you're running around the surface of an unexplored planet, scanning the various trees and minerals, then crest a hill to see a herd of 30 feet tall rabbit-turtle hybrids grazing in a gorgeous valley under a series of ringed planets and their orbiting moons, you'll see what I'm talking about. This is a regular occurrence. Nearly every planet you choose to land on is going to be breathtaking, often in new ways with random terrain types. In any other game, the puddle-like depth of the scanning system and the animal behavior would be inexcusable instead of mildly frustrating, even if the variety is an illusion. The illusion itself is truly captivating. This is also a game with no primary incentive to play the generic central mission, but at least you'll never say that there isn't anything to do. The side content is also frustratingly generic, don't get me wrong, but there is an awful lot of stuff to complete and collect, and the incentive to do so is stronger because it often yields materials or blueprints required to craft some cool toys. Every single system that I've warped into is contained a space station inhabited by a mishmash of the game's 3 primary sentient life forms. These guys will flat out sell you equipment or blueprints, handle assigning your missions, and have various puzzles built into their dialogue. The way dialect is managed in No Man's Sky is fascinating, and I haven't ever seen anything quite like it. When you start the game, you'll be able to speak with all of the aliens, but will have no clue what they're saying because you don't know their language. As you play, you'll slowly begin to pick up the meaning of words from time to time through ancient ciphers spread throughout the universe. Every time you unlock a word, you'll now be able to understand that word in conversation. Over time, you'll be able to cobble together what the aliens are saying to you and take advantage of various tasks or rewards from speaking with them. This is helpful particularly when trying to boost reputation with each faction so that you can unlock more powerful blueprints or take advantage of trade. When it comes to the in-game economy, it's clear that they put a large emphasis on getting it right. Every system has an economy managed by one of the factions and has a different health. Some will trade in your favor and others will try and take advantage of you. Everything in the game has value, and you'll constantly be accruing units to spend or save. The economy brings further meaning to base building and farming, because some of the most expensive items are going to require a ton of moolah. I warped into a system once to find a massive freighter being attacked by a swarm of pirate fighters. With some work, I was able to dispatch them and then dock inside the freighter to speak with the ship's captain. Miraculously, he was so grateful of my efforts that he straight up gave me his ship, something that would have otherwise cost a veritable fortune. These freighters are not typically given for free, and often cost upwards of the tens of millions of units. Each freighter can hire a large host of frigates for several million a pop to be sent on missions, and each freighter is also capable of holding 6 of your average starship that you pilot down into atmosphere and use in dogfighting. Did I mention that those are also worth tens of millions themselves? When you factor in the cost of buying new multi-tools and exosuits and various upgrades for everything that you own, you can see where generating wealth can become incredibly important, and having such a robust economy and its supporting systems is a massive benefit to the overall experience of playing the game, and will be a reason to play it for months in order to come closer to unlocking everything here. Every item, upgrade, and ship ranks from C, B, A to S, and the A and S rankings of anything are monumentally expensive. These work as sufficient goals to incentivize working through the game's various problems. The first time I repaired my starship and got off the first planet, I absolutely hated the control scheme for mouse and keyboard, but thank God I'm not the one who designs these things, because after spending some real time getting used to it, I really think that piloting the ship is one of the single greatest parts of the game. Flying in and out of atmosphere seamlessly with no loading, engaging your pulse drive to pop into space several thousand kilometers away, and then re-entering another planet's atmosphere upside down as the air burns around you is flat out incredible. Capturing this feeling in a game with something as simple as getting around the map is a feat worthy of my top praise, and that's just scratching the surface. Dropping out of your pulse drive inside an asteroid belt, already being fired upon by a contingent of pirates and having to immediately spin to evade through the belt, a fleet of freighters and frigates dropping from hyperspace with a flash in the background, is everything I've ever wanted from any sci-fi game or film ever, and produces the sort of awestruck experience I described earlier. There's something about it that makes you think every action you take during these sequences is just so fucking cool. From what I understand, there are even bigger space battles that I have yet to experience, and I find that alone to be a worthwhile incentive to continue playing the game through all of its many frustrations. Spending an abundance of time on any one planet will offer many things to do and collect, but it's easy to get burnt out on them. The one place that did not hold true for me is base building, so it's even more of a shame that they make it so difficult to fully enjoy this with friends. As long as you stick to solo though, this is an engaging and rewarding activity. Finding salvage technology and buying blueprints from space stations will begin to fill out your collection of what type of structures and items you can build, and after a while it begins to sink in exactly how diverse a base you can make. Base building has no real limit structurally, so you can build as high and wide as you are practically capable of doing. Eventually you'll be able to hire alien specialists from space stations to man different research stations in your base, and help uncover even further blueprints, buildings, and machinery. It won't be long until you've built yourself a vast network of teleportation gates between planets with your and your friends' bases and orbiting space stations, and traversal to previous installations will become a trivial matter. The planets you build on are massive in scale, so ground vehicles have been patched into the game to ease the ordeal of exploration. For those who enjoy building in games like Subnautica or The Forest, this is going to more than suit your appetites. The game has so much going for it, and so much that it does that you really can't get anywhere else, and that's helped cement it as such an oddity in the industry. It's so strange to have a game this good also be this terrible, and ultimately it's going to be a matter of deciding what type of game you're looking for. If you're looking for a survival shooter with an emphasis on adventure and good combat mechanics, give this one a hard pass. But if you're looking for something more laid back that will let you explore and build as you desire, and will allow yourself to be swept up in a sense of discovery, you're going to find a great many enjoyable hours here. The game has its normal gameplay mode, but has also added both a more strict survival mode and a permadeath version of it, as well as a creative mode that will give you endless cash, zero danger, and an infinite horizon to build towards. There is reason to look forward to further free updates, as Hello Games has made it clear they plan to strongly support the title for the foreseeable future. Many players and those in games journalism are applauding their continued support without charging for DLC, but I'm not so eager to give them credit for this considering the millions of copies they sold when the game wasn't finished yet. Even so, No Man's Sky is a very good title that dances on the edge of greatness, and another round of updates may very well push it into being one of the greatest games of the generation, while it certainly already is one of the best in the sci-fi exploration genre. A few updates centered around the main story, ground combat, and wildlife behavior would fix nearly every issue I have with the game. As it stands today, No Man's Sky offers an experience that I haven't gotten anywhere else. With a falter here and there, but some remarkable highs, the game earns a 7.5 for me, with the incredibly likely potential of climbing higher with a few tweaks in the near future. If you bought it at release and own the game, this is 100% something you should boot it up again for, despite its rocky first year. If you're on the fence about it, the amazingly persistent $60 price tag isn't doing it any favors, and I would advise anyone considering this purchase to look for sales where they're able to. This week, the game is 50% off at an even 30, and I wouldn't be surprised if they soon reduce it permanently. At that price, I can say you're almost certain to get your money's worth, and likely much more. This is already a long video, but there is so much more that I could talk about. Expect more No Man's Sky on the channel in the next week, as I intend to ride this all the way through. Thank you all so much for watching this video. It was only a couple months ago I decided I was going to try and make some worthwhile content, and I'm very happy to say that we just got over 1,000 subscribers a few days ago, and I couldn't be more grateful for everyone's support and suggestions. Seriously guys, I have always had a lot I've wanted to say about the games that I love and the industry that produces them, and even though the channel is small, it's incredibly meaningful to me that you guys watch my stuff and share what you think. This time I want to hear what you guys think about Hello Games and their decision to continue support for No Man's Sky. Do you think the updates over the last couple years have made the game into what you expected at launch? Has it gotten even better than that? Or does it still have a ways to go? After playing it, which features would you like to see made a priority, and what have you loved about what they've added? I'll catch you guys down in the comments, and again, thank you so much for your support. Take it easy till next time.